This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. Now, sometimes we can't avoid the maze. We're going to walk into brick walls, we're going to get lost along the way, or the journey that we originally planned for ourselves is just going to magically disappear. But that doesn't mean that our journey doesn't stop. It surely does. And today, my guest is Kimberly Smith. And Kimberly has a journey like the rest of us. And we're going to listen to where she's coming from, where she's going, and how we can just like listen to other people and realize that, you know what, life is pretty darn good. We can get from A to Z. So, welcome, Kimberly. How are you today?
I'm great, Karen. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So, when I saw your bio on Podmatch, um, there were a lot of things that sort of triggered me. And talking about the transitions through life.
Mm.
And most of us look at other people and we think they've got it all. They know exactly where they've been, they know where they're going today, and they know where they want to be tomorrow. But the reality of it is, if you just listen just a little bit, you're going to find out that we're all in a state of confusion. And it doesn't mean it's bad, but it just means that nothing really is perfect. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a pretty ordinary gal. I'll start there. I grew up in upstate New York, and now I live in Houston, Texas. Which has been my home for pretty much the last 5 years. I lived here for 2 years before that. Moved to Florida for a while, so I've been around. And I grew up just like anybody else. Kind of just following the people around me, looking towards society's ideal vision of what success is, right, for
Sure.
guidance. And I came from a pretty humble background. My mom was a single mom with 3 kids. By the time she was 26, she was going blind, actually. So she had she had a lot on her plate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I grew up in a pretty ordinary suburb, but I never kind of felt like I belonged there, right? Like we weren't in the same financial category as most of my peers. So I felt like an outsider. And then, I managed to, get myself into college, which I think came as a surprise for everybody in my family. I wasn't a stellar student. I wasn't super confident. I wasn't an athlete. I had a job. I went to, by the time, since I was, 13, 14, babysitting, and then got my working papers at 14, 15, and I got a job. That was my reality, was kind of that hustle till you make it. Work hard and you're going to be successful. And I was successful. I gained a lot of confidence throughout college, and, again, was just trying to do the best I could and check the boxes of what it meant to arrive
Right.
into adulthood, right? Like, we expect like the doors to open and the band to strike up and for it to be this really amazing experience. And, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I had reached a certain level of success and I kind of looked around like, is this it? Is this what my life is going to be like for until, till the end of time? um, it really started, like my personal reckoning started about 7.5 years ago. I was a new mom. I lived in Florida at the time. I didn't have a support system of family or anything around me. So again, I felt like I had a lot of weight on my shoulders. My husband's job was very consuming. And so I felt like a single mom from day one.
Sure.
And I know a lot of women feel like that, even if they are married or in a secure partnership, they feel like nobody understands what they're going through. Motherhood can be very isolating. It is very isolating.
Right.
As a woman going through that for the first time, your body changes in all of these miraculous ways, but you become disconnected from who you knew yourself to be.
Absolutely.
So, there was just a lot swirling around. I started to have a lot of anxiety and depression issues, frankly, a lot of mental health struggles. And, it could have been postpartum in a way. I think it was just me kind of opening my eyes to the world and how I had been living and how I had, arrived into this partnership and marriage and, things that just weren't meeting my needs. And how would I go about changing that? Right. Like, we are not taught how to evolve. We're
Right.
not taught how to embrace change. We're taught how to fear it and how we shouldn't rock the boat. Right. We're taught
You
to be
got it.
grateful for what we have. Don't rock the boat. Don't cause any trouble. Right. Like, at least that's like, those are the I heard as a kid, right? Like, be grateful for what you have and don't be greedy. Don't want more.
Right.
So there was a lot that came up during that time, Karen, and I was stumbling. I was finding my way through the world, and yeah, it was great. I had to use my resources. I had to get creative, and through it, everything in my life changed, and parts of it felt really frustrating and really messy. And then there's been so much beauty as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And just listening, you mentioned that your mom was a single mom and going blind with 3 young children. Yet you were a married mom, but it sounds like you just felt insecure in that relationship as well. But you had a role model, but you had a totally different role model than who you thought you were going to be, obviously. And I think that confuses us, we grow up with certain expectations and these voices play in our head. And it sounds like you were extremely resourceful as a very young child. And so you sort of expected that of yourself. And it's interesting how we beat ourselves up and say, but this isn't right. Where am I? So, where did you finally get the courage to say, okay, this isn't right. I have to make some changes?
Yeah. Well, I think, coming from that humble background and, where like I didn't feel safe in many ways in terms of not my physical safety, but just like financially safe, financially secure. You get used to this hustle, hustle, hustle of
Right.
always needing to work yourself out of a problem or get to the next place. And then when there are no problems, and also, battled with perfectionism and people pleasing. Perfectionists love to stir up problems so that they can actually feel useful and feel like they're applying their energy to something. So, I think I did that in some ways. What was the final breaking point, or how did I kind of get myself out of it? I was uncomfortable, right? Like physically uncomfortable with anxiety and depression. Growing up, even amongst the challenges, I always was a pretty upbeat, positive person, right? I was very naturally optimistic, naturally energetic. And that was something I strongly identified with. But over the years of kind of moving into this adult phase of my life, I felt like I became kind of jaded, right? Working for different companies where I expected people in those positions to do better. I became very pessimistic about leadership and humanity, and just what are people's motives here, right? Like I started to see the world as this very selfish place, and it definitely took kind of that reckoning with like, okay, I'm having breathing problems, I'm not feeling good, I'm unhappy generally day to day, I'm frustrated, agitated, not sleeping well. Those things are not sustainable. That's not a sustainable way to live.
Right.
Nobody wants to live like that, right? That certainly wasn't where I thought I would be, even while having like a great home and a great job and married, like perfect on paper life, yes, but not inside. My first call to action, Karen, was to get myself a damn therapist, right? Like I didn't know where to start. I had seen a therapist once as I arrived in Florida, just as it pertained to like career stuff, and then was able to find another great therapist kind of postpartum, as I was going back to work and kind of realizing like, I'm not happy. I should be happy. I've got this great baby. I live in paradise, like 5 miles from the beach. I work for one of
Wow.
the best organizations in Palm Beach County. What the heck is wrong with me, right? And that definitely opened my eyes to things that needed to change, things that needed my time, my love, my attention. And I became more motivated in different ways, right? But it took a while, it took a while to get to some of these root causes and find some, I don't want to say cures, but to find some remedies for these feelings.
Right.
Again, emotional intelligence, not something we're really taught growing up. We're not even really taught to identify the full
Right.
range of emotions, right? Most people have no idea like what compassion is until they're actually well into adulthood, right?
And there's even a lot of those adults that have no idea what
Exactly.
compassion is. Yes.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And grief too, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of grief that is built into life, and how do you reconcile that? How do you explain that? And I think there's something to be said for experience and you just meeting those where you find them. But certainly I think I came up against those tough emotions and didn't even know what to call some of them because I had never been taught what they were. So therapy was a great container for me to get to know myself again. Of course, there's a lot of work that I had to do on my own, right? And
Right.
just making space for myself and learning to love the different layers of who I was and then also who I had grown into be.
And that's a very interesting concept because many of us don't realize that we are growing and evolving. We look in the mirror, we still see that 5-year-old child who mom said, don't touch that, or don't wear that, or I don't want you to play with that kid next door. And then those voices, we hear them when we're washing our face, when we're brushing our teeth, when we're driving down the road and something just reminds us of a time. And, you know, I mentioned to somebody earlier, um, there's a big thing on Facebook that said, if you reverse your age, how old are you today?
Mm.
And every time I look at that, at least in the past year, I keep saying, yeah, I'm that 17-year-old kid. That's how I feel most of the time. I don't feel like an adult. I don't always do adult things. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you can recognize what you're doing, why you're doing it. And so, as you mentioned, you had to dig deep inside of yourself and say, there's this hurt in my gut. And I don't know why it's there. I don't know how it got there. But if I don't start chipping away at it, I'm going to hurt for the rest of my life. And is this how I want to live out my life?
Right.
So when you started chipping away at it, and it is a lot of work, and
Yeah.
for our listeners, therapy it can be wonderful, but you need a therapist who lets you do the work.
Right.
Okay. I've had a couple who tried doing the work for me.
Mm.
And, in the beginning, I thought, this is great. Yeah, they're going to tell me what to do. And it was like, that was my biggest problem. I didn't want people to tell me what to do.
Mhm.
And so when you find a therapist who says, okay, you got to do this. So now you start doing it and you've got a lot on your plate doing it. You're married, going back to work, new baby,
Yeah.
basically new area. So we know it's not going to happen overnight, but how long did it take you before you actually said, I think I'm getting there?
Yeah. Oh, well, it got a lot worse before it got better, Karen.
I'm sure.
I mean, life for sure did. Like I said, there were parts that were really, really messy. And gosh, when I think about how long it took, I mean, it was at least 2 or 3 years before I really had some major breakthroughs, right? And I'll say that like I wasn't in active therapy that whole time. During that time, we had moved back to Houston, Texas to try and regain some balance in our life. And I mean, we were living with my in-laws for a period of time. We had a renter in the house that we had owned here. So I was doing a 3-hour commute with a 2-year-old. It was major chaos,
Wow.
right? And so in 2017, I found another therapist here, and she's been with me since then. So just met with her the other day. Great, a little mental health hygiene check
Right.
in, but she really was magic for me. So it is really finding the right therapist or the right coach, right? And so yeah, there were some magic aha moments with her, and really some radical self-honesty, right? I think it's so hard for most of us to admit what we really want, because again, we're not really trained to be in touch with our desires,
Right.
because of that kind of like greedy mentality. And just like now I see my desires as this amazing internal compass, right? Like that are guiding me. They're there for a reason. So, there's no guilt around it now, but yeah, I mean, she helped me really kind of learn that, like, to speak my truth. And there was a lot of, things from my childhood even that had made that happen, right? Where I kind of lost my voice. I had lost my authenticity. I was trying, because we all want to fit in, we all want to belong. And because of that, this strong society and culture that we live in, that's, to be honest, very shame inducing. If you don't have X, Y, and Z, then you're worth nothing, right?
Right.
That message comes across so loudly in so many different things out there, and we internalize it. And then also, we get messages from our family and just our upbringing and our, more personal worlds. But yeah, we become this adapted version, right? So that's the opposite of our authentic self. We
Right.
become our adapted self, which really isn't who we are born to be. It's who we think we need to be. So letting go of that adaptive self and really getting to know who I was, and being able to own my voice and really be in touch with God. Yeah, this is what I want, and I don't need to apologize for it. Was
Exactly.
liberating.
And, a lot of this, it sounds like, was happening at the peak of social media. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And as much as I love social media, I hate it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken me a long time to be able to read things out there and say, they may be that happy. Their life may be that perfect. But you know what? That's not me. Okay. And I don't have to show my fanciest dress on Christmas morning to make people think that I'm okay. But yet, for a long time, I thought that, if, we don't pose in front of the Christmas tree, then you know what? People are going to think that my family is breaking up.
Mm-hmm.
If I ever post something saying, hey, I'm taking a mental health day today, people are going to say, oh, is she crazy? The
Right.
reality of it is, we all need mental health days. We absolutely do. I need to take more. I don't, because I put on my cape in the morning and I try to be superwoman. But I remind myself in bits and pieces during the day, okay, face reality. You cannot fly. You don't have magical powers. But those are the messages that we get on social media. So in 2017, that had to have been hitting you pretty hard.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And there was a lot that people didn't know about, gosh, my marriage and the state of it. And, we had, via social media, we had this amazing life, right? People had watched us buy our first house when we were 26 and moved to Palm Beach, Florida. And, he worked for one of the major employers in Palm Beach County. I worked for the other one, right? And so we looked like this power couple,
Yeah.
right? And in reality, I felt trapped. I felt like we were completely disconnected. There was little to no passion left in there, right? Like it felt like we were roommates. It felt like
Yeah.
we were business partners. And and then coming back to Houston, we tried to revive some of that. We tried to go on trips and like really like spend time together. And it was too little too late for us. I think that like I never regret anything. I think my marriage was a gift from God, and it was a time that I had to go through. And it was an amazing container for, my beautiful daughter to be born. And now I have a lifelong friend too, in the sense of my ex-husband, right? Like we've grown tremendously through ending our marriage in a very unconventional way. That was, our marriage started and our relationship started with love, and we chose to end our relationship with a lot of love too. So yeah, it was hard, to share that publicly, that my marriage was ending, right? Immediately, gosh, like, reckoning with guilt and shame and all of those things, right? Like people thinking I was going to be a failure, and where would my life be going? Like, there was just so many unknowns.
Sure.
And I could see, and I can see now, having gone through that, why so many people stay in unhappy marriages. It's very scary. It is. We think about 50% of marriages fail or end in divorce. But what about the other percentage of people who never get a divorce because they're just so afraid?
You're
That
so
was my
right.
biggest fear,
Yeah.
was staying in that place forever and just never having anything joyful again. That was a huge motivator.
Well, and it's interesting as you share your story. I was a divorced mom when my oldest was 5 years old.
Mhm.
Again, felt the shame, felt the ridicule, wanted to put the blame on him. It took the two of us a long time to
Yeah.
become friends. We weren't as lucky as you, okay? But we had to go through that very, very painful conditioning.
Mhm.
But I also came from a family that just, you couldn't work it out. I mean, constantly asking.
Right.
Yet my parents never truly approved of him. So
Yeah.
it was like, why are you shaming me because of
Mhm.
this? Again, that's a different time than 2017. This
Sure.
was back in the early 80s. So a lot has changed since then. But what I hear you saying is that both you and somehow your ex-husband actually both worked through this. You realized that, hey, there's got to be a better way. Because
Yeah.
if you
I mean,
stay together,
we didn't want to be miserable. We both wanted to be happy. And we have this beautiful daughter too, right? And divorce, it is, we all know, I mean, divorce in itself, I hate the word because it
right?
just brings such a negative connotation with it. I really want, like, I've heard people say uncoupling, which is so much better. And but yeah, divorce comes with a lot of like that visceral reaction.
Yes.
And because we know how painful it can be, but it doesn't have to be, right? Like,
Right.
again, we're kind of that societal expectation that divorces are messy and hurtful, and you're supposed to hate the other person, and everybody's involved is going to be traumatized no matter what. Well, hell no. I didn't want that to be my reality. So what can I do? Right. And so there was a lot of compassion in there, right? Compassion for our younger selves who just weren't equipped
Right.
for marriage and all that responsibility at once at that young age. And just for maybe, just being the partners we needed at that time to learn those lessons and to bring this beautiful person into the world, right? And let it be that, right? Like, not needing to overanalyze it, but yeah, it definitely took us being supported by our own, groups of friends and our own families. And we had the same kind of thing. Some people, his parents have been married for close to 40 years now. So, they were just as devastated. They went through their grieving period, I think.
Sure.
But divorce you can come out on the other side quite well. But
Absolutely.
you have to have that intention to begin with, right? That hatred and holding on to those hurts and all of that, it really does nobody any good. It only drags you backward. It only keeps you stuck and uncomfortable for that much longer, right? It's that form of
Absolutely.
resistance. Like whatever we resist is going to persist. So if you resist the inevitable, you're going to be in that place for longer. If you go with it and you can approach it with love and compassion, you'll come out much better.
Well, on my end, it took almost 21 years for the two of us to come to a point. And the interesting part for the two of us, it didn't happen consciously. Our son was graduating law school. He wanted both his dad and me there.
Yeah.
He, made the choice that if you want to bring my stepmom, my stepdad, that's okay. But I want the two of you there. If you don't want to sit next to each other, I'll get you tickets separated. And both of us even said, no, we'll sit together.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to each of us, we had said that. And his grandparents came along as well,
Good.
who never liked me, but we had a wonderful day together. And it was that day that you could see from the beginning to end, we just let that all go away.
Yeah.
That, why did we hold on to it so long?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to beat myself up over it. And I want our listeners to know that it might take a long time. You might have those feelings, but if you haven't worked through them, and that was my problem, because every therapist that I had tried to work through, I kept waiting for them to tell me what to do. And when they didn't tell me what to do, I stayed stuck. And that's why this program is so important in my mind, because we all do things a little differently. We all get our strengths from different areas. And when I first started to hear your story about single mom going blind, brothers and sisters, it's like, oh my God, like, how did you make it to today? Because there's so many who would say it's not possible.
Right.
But it is. But you have to want to do the work.
You have to want to do the work, and you have to be open to seeing things in a completely new way, right? And even things that you never thought were possible for yourself or for other people, right? And just knowing that, like, if they are possible for other people, they're possible for you too, right? Like there's no limits. That's something that I have really, I was living in this confined little box of what I thought I had to do, what I thought I should do. You get to decide, right? And you can't mess it up. Like that's the most beautiful thing about life, is that you really can't mess it up. And anything that you want, like your desires, in my opinion, like I said, were placed there for a reason. They're guiding you. Those little feelings of like, oh, I want that, or like, that would be so cool to do, or whatever, like go do it. Like, what is stopping you? That's the question that I always ask people. What is stopping you from starting that business, from starting that podcast, for going for that promotion, for changing jobs, for changing industries, from meeting that partner, from traveling the world, or having a baby, right? Like you see women now, like they haven't found their partner, and they decide to embark on motherhood on a solo journey, which is amazing, right? Like they've decided to not let the parameters of what they think something has to look like. And that all starts with leaning into the positive side of possible, right? We want to lean into the reasons why something won't work. And we go into the side of skepticism, which, we all have to wear the black hat sometimes. I think that reality check is, obviously useful, but there are certain times where it's really not useful. And if you really want to take a chance and, surprise yourself and really feel that confidence and that joy that, you create within you, then you got to start opening your mind and heart.
Well, and what I hear you saying is that we have one life, but we have many paths that we can take.
Of course.
So if we start walking down the straight and narrow and it just doesn't work and it doesn't make us happy, there's a fork in the road. You can take it experiment with it.
Yeah.
If that's not right, you can always backtrack. A lot of us think that we can't. We use money as a reason why we can't do certain things. I can't leave my job because I make X amount. Okay. Well, maybe you can't leave your job today because you need that X amount.
Right.
But what is it that you really love to do that you can start doing? Take those baby steps, because maybe your job will get better because you're doing something else that you love. We don't think along that way. We just say, I don't like what I'm doing. I'm stuck. But are you stuck?
Right.
Go ahead.
You bring up a great point, right? In the sense of, feeling like we have to burn it all down, right? Like we've gotten to that point, and like a lot of people get to that point where they're so frustrated. They just want to quit their job. They want to, they just want to start over. Right. And like, you don't have to quit your job or end your marriage. Like those aren't necessarily the answers, right? It's a hard truth that everything starts with us, right? So
Right.
if you hate your job, yeah, and understanding why, right? Is it the fact that you're taking things too personal? Do you have a boss that you need to set boundaries with? Do you need to ask for a raise? Because a lot of companies, they lose track of their compensation and where people are at and the paths that they put people on. If you think you're worth more, then ask for more. If you think you're worth more, then, nothing's stopping you from exploring the job market and stuff too. But there's ways that we can actually make our situation better where we are.
Right.
And that, of course, starts with us and making those decisions and maybe having courageous conversations with our colleagues or our leadership at work or our partner. Right. If you're not happy in your marriage, like ask yourself why. What needs of yours aren't being met? Can you just don't write somebody off and be like, yeah, they're just not capable. Like you have to go down and do some exploration, and then you're going to find more information too. The acts of changing your decisions and behavior and the way that you operate within your existing world is going to give you more information to make some of those bigger decisions if you need to, right? It can be very scary to, one day just be like, yep, I guess I want a divorce. Well, I'll tell you, I think most people, it's not a light decision, right? Like it took me years to actually get to the point where I confidently could say, this isn't going to work. So giving yourself room to kind of gain that knowledge and more information so that you can be confident about maybe making some of the other bigger changes too.
The other thing that I think is important, that we should be making the changes for ourselves, not for the people around us. I know that 10 years ago, I was in corporate America, and I've shared this story over and over again. I loved my position. I loved what I did, but the culture was killing me. And I kept fighting it in my head. Mm-hmm. And the more I tried to fight it and ignore it, the more it just would creep in. And I found myself getting very depressed, not wanting to go into work, even though I was working 12, 13-hour days. So I was going in and I was working, and I kept working harder and harder to try to chip through what I didn't like. Yeah. And my company finally made the comment that, I should go out on medical leave. And I thought, okay, they're right. I don't take breaks. I'm going to do this. Sadly, 2 days later, they said I abandoned my job. And it was like, whoa, where did that come from? But it opened my eyes that I couldn't go back. They knew it. I knew it. And maybe I had to have them do that to me. And I can say that 10 years hence. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But what I learned from all that is when something doesn't feel right, to examine myself from head to toe. Where doesn't it feel right? And if I don't understand it at that time, It's okay. Take a break. But what was happening 10 years ago, not only was I unhappy in my work, I was unhappy at home
Yeah.
because I was bringing it all home. I thought the problem was also at home.
Yeah.
But once I wasn't working anymore and bringing it home, the problems that I had at home were minuscule.
Mm-hmm.
If I hadn't been in the right mindset when I was kicked out of my job, I probably would have gone to my husband and said, screw you. We don't need to be married
Yeah.
because I was hurting.
Yeah.
But I didn't because I kept going into myself saying, why am I hurting? Hey, why do I feel better right now?
Mm-hmm.
Is he talking to me differently? Am I
Mm-hmm.
responding differently? So I love what you said that it took you a while to see where you were going. Because if you don't, those decisions may not be the right decisions to make.
Right. And some of the things that you mentioned, even about how things happen within our world, right, that we have no control over with your employer. I had a similar experience where I had joined, I had tried kind of coming back to Houston, found it hard to find a place that like really I felt like I could do good work there and have longevity, and the culture was a fit and all of that. And I did a couple contracts. I found this job that was just so me, and I got it, and mysteriously was let go after less than 60 days.
Wow.
And I had never had an experience like that. In Texas, it's a right to work state. They don't have to give you any reason.
Right.
And I think it honestly was just it was a new position, and maybe they didn't even really need it. And after that time, they just realized that maybe they had to figure out the outline more. Gave me a very generous, package, but still I was so grief stricken, and it was like where everything was crumbling, right? And it was almost like, and this comes down to everybody's individual like faith and what they believe in, right? And I kind of have this, new thought perspective of God and the universe and how they all entwine, but to me that was a gentle nudge from above saying, this is not the path for you right now. This is not where you need to be putting your attention. You're not going to avoid the hard stuff anymore at home. You're going to face it, and you're going to be better for it. And so like those devastating things, or like those like question marks in our head, they're almost these total redirections of, nope, not that way, or that's not meant for you, right? Because there's a lot of things that we just don't have control over.
So you've gone through this. You know that most likely somewhere down the line, you may go through a stumbling block again. So, what are you doing today to keep yourself as emotionally, intelligently well?
Yeah, sure. Such a great question. I spend a lot of time with myself, for myself. I think once you are, you hear people talk about their awakening, right? And I love that term because many of us are asleep at the wheel sometimes, right? It's very easy to fall into this, like the monotonous cycle of daily life and family and work. And then again, you kind of from time to time are like, this doesn't feel fulfilling and whatever, and I, once you come out of that though, you realize that it's very intentional to make sure that you don't fall back into that same routine. So, I do a lot of self-care. I've slowed down my life tremendously. I'm very intentional about the way that I schedule my time, because I have unsubscribed from the hustle culture. That's a big thing that's changed for me, is I don't believe that I need to work 12-hour days in order to be successful or make six figures or do anything like that, right? I've really designed my life the way that I want it. And anybody can do that. But it does take being intentional. It takes a lot of self-care, and definitely being in touch with your thoughts and your emotions. Certainly disappointment is a very hard emotion that I've had to face over the last couple of years. Again, an emotion that we're not really taught how to reconcile. And like, much like you said, Karen, really having those moments of self-reflection, right? When we start to not feel, what do I need right now in this moment? What is this emotion telling me? What is this anxiety telling me? A lot of people are struggling with anxiety and stress. That's my main shtick, is like unsubscribing from hustle culture, not like really managing stress day to day. It's a lifestyle, it's a mindset. But anxiety freaks people out, right? Because it's so built into our nervous system and our just our primal responses, right, in our body. And anxiety, I've learned to befriend, right? Like when I'm feeling fearful or anxious, there's a couple questions that I ask myself. What am I afraid of right now? And what am I trying to control? Right? Like, what am I trying to fight for control? Right. And a lot of times we want to control things that really we have no place in wanting to control.
Right.
So, I think really doing those things, like caring for myself and my mental health, is a priority. Without that, I cannot flourish. I cannot live out my mission. I cannot help other people or be the mother that I want to be to my daughter. That was a huge motivator too in getting a divorce, was my daughter deserves to have a happy mother, right? And sometimes that means that, obviously it meant that my marriage wasn't going to work out, but obviously too, there's boundaries with my daughter. I'm trying to demonstrate to her, a better way of life, one that you can be successful, you can have all the things that you want, you can also do great work in the world and have meaningful work, and you can still thrive personally, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, right? It's not one or the other. It's, you get to have it all. So I have a lot of daily practices. And then of course, like my morning and evening routines are staples, exercise is a routine. And yeah, checking in with my therapist and my coach when I need to. Everybody needs to be supported. And oftentimes our family and even our partner are not the best people to hold that space for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I shared this on another show we did the other day, that I ride a stationary bike 5 to 7 nights a week.
Yeah.
And my husband gets a little annoyed with me. He's not an exerciser.
Yeah.
And he knows he should be. I mean, he'll be the first one to say, yeah, I know I should be. And I think it's more of, I don't even want to call it jealousy, but it's like a little envious that I know how to do this for myself, and he just can't get into it. And there are some nights he'll say to me, do you have to ride that? And my response to him is, yes, I do. In the beginning, when I started doing it, if I saw he didn't want me to do it, I'd get off. And I thought, I'm losing and he's not winning, because I'm going to get cranky for not doing it. And so when you talk about that support system, yes, if you are in a good relationship, you are supportive, but not supportive about everything. I too have a wonderful coach, and we do a podcast together, and I can't wait for the podcast time, because it's like, that's the thing I was missing this past week. And so I capture it and I can take it on with me the following week. There are certain people I don't share things with. And that's something that I sort of heard you say, that you have to pick and choose. Not everybody's going to understand. And that's okay. They don't have to understand everything. But we have to understand who we're leaning on and why we're leaning on them. And the big thing I was going to ask you before we end this, if you had one piece of wisdom to leave for your daughter as she grows up, do you have something special for her?
Well, I have lots of special things for her, actually. So I love to write. I write her letters, and I hope to one day publish that into a book called Letters to Amelia, because I think for her to know what was happening in the world as she was growing up and maybe too young to really conceptualize a lot of the things. And then also as a tool for her to get to know me and where I was as a, young mother and young adult. And I think it'll be great. But my best advice for my daughter is really just to never forget about yourself. Like, people will say that, that's selfish. No, you have to be your number one priority. You are the key to anything and everything you want to give and leave in this physical world, right here on earth. So, getting to know yourself is a gift, evolving, and really letting go of how you think things need to be, right? Like learning how to really surrender to the path of life, and just embrace your unique evolution, right? Like it's such a gift that we get to see these different versions of ourselves as we evolve. It's a beautiful metamorphosis that we get to witness in ourselves. So yeah, I mean, there's too many things to choose, Karen, but like that would be one of them is, being in touch with yourself is number one.
And I love that because, being unique, I think, is so important in today's society. We have to stop conforming. We have to collaborate. Yes, that's one thing. But our uniqueness allows us to shine. We all have something special. And if you don't allow it to come out, you can't be happy. And I tricked myself probably for the first 55 years of my life. If I made everybody else happy, I was going to be happy. And it was basically somewhere between 55 and 60. I woke up and I said, this is ridiculous. Yeah. I am working so hard at making other people happy. And what am I leaving behind? And when I started thinking I was selfish, but then realizing I wasn't, it made the whole difference. And that's what I see in you, is that I'm not being selfish. I'm taking the time I need to be strong enough for me. I'm going to put that, oxygen mask on first so I can help Amelia. And then after I help Amelia, anybody else who's in need, I can help because I'm strong enough. But if I don't put that mask on, I'm worthless to everybody.
Absolutely. And I wish on a macro level as a society, we could see this, right? You see I picture all these people going to work for these organizations who have, now they have all these people who are really ready to self-abandon in pursuit of doing a good job for the company, right? Like they'll put up with terrible bosses and terrible cultures and not enough benefits and not enough time off and not like all of this nonsense, right? And the only people and it actually, everybody suffers,
right?
The individual suffers because they feel like they can't keep up with life, physically, mentally, financially, all the things, right? And then because they're chronically stressed and because they're so disconnected from themselves and their creativity, they're also disconnected from innovation, right? And they actually don't perform at their highest level for those same organizations that want to exploit them so much, right? And would, give them their pink slip in a heartbeat if it was to do with their bottom line, right? So I dream of a world where it's a little bit more it's for the preservation of humanity, right? Can we pay people what they're worth? Can we give them the juicy benefits and this amazing lifestyle so that they feel so supported that they can then do their best work and their best ideas come out and their best collaborations happen and the best services and products, which are sustainable and also for a good use of humanity, make their way out into the world to solve, global problems and make a real impact, a positive one.
Well, it takes one person to get it started. Wow. So how can our listeners find you?
Of course. Yeah. They can go to my website, which is encompasscoachingservices.com. So that's ENCOMPASS MPASS coachingservices.com. Again, my name is Kimberly Smith. I'm based in Houston, Texas. I'm a mindset and resilience coach. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle is at kimberly.brooke, BROOKE.Smith. And right now I've got some exciting things, online. You can grab my free mindset and affirmations bundle, which has a free ebook in it as well. And I've got my Empowered Resilient Woman program kicking off in February of 2022. So still a few spots left in that. And let me tell you, it's going to be great, Karen. I have 3 guest coaches joining from all over the world. It is such an incredible program for women who are ready to do things differently, who are ready to let go of the stress, the overwhelm, the guilt, overcome self-doubt, perfectionism, procrastination, all of that, and really carve an easier path through life, through life to success, all of it. So I'm pumped about it. So yeah, thank you.
Well, we'll get all that in the show notes. I want to wish you the best of luck. We'll have to have you back on.
Anytime.
We're going to have to talk about your book and, how we can all be a little bit more mindful of what we do from day to day.
Yes. It's coming soon. I definitely feel another episode coming.
Okay. And give our love to your daughter. She sounds adorable.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, Karen.
Same here. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.